Out and 4 days in, and then I'm out 10 days again. 4 days ain't enough to lose these low-down roughneck blues.
Knowing yourself is beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle. You know you're in love when you can't fall asleep because reality is finally better than your dreams. Dr. Seuss. Hello to all and welcome to the Ear-Wicker podcast. Follow along with our host, Vince Corkery, as he discusses a broad range of musical topics, with interviews of top players, club owners, producers, and engineers that make it all happen. Your virtual backstage pass. Remember to like and subscribe to this podcast, and of course, it's free.
Welcome, everyone, to Ear-Wicker Podcast. And today we're outside the lovely Jack Nolan's down here in Soulard, Missouri. And we have a great musician. He's an Irish musician, and he's been transplanted. His name's Dan Lowery, and he's decided to come down and waste some time with me, so appreciate it, Dan.
You bet, Vince.
All right.
Good place to do it, man.
Yeah, it is. A great day.
Bar in Soulard.
And we're outside. You can probably hear all that, but we had to do it today. We just couldn't go inside today. Too nice. So anyway, Dan, you have to tell me, where are you from?
I'm born in Milwaukee, but raised in Texas, just outside of Dallas, in a little suburb called Irving. And I was raised there and moved to New York City when I was 19 and been all over the place ever since.
Okay.
But Texas is what I consider home.
Okay. What got you into playing Irish music? And what was your first instrument?
Well, it was what got me into music more generally was the influence of my dad, who was a professional musician himself until he started having a big family, and I'm one of 9 kids. So he became a college professor, teaching theology and philosophy. But he was a musician at heart, and our house was full of music growing up. My mom wasn't musical at all, but my dad more than made up for it, and he played a lot of early rock and roll when he was a kid. Folk music, and then got into bluegrass, and so the house was particularly full of acoustic sounds is what I remember most. I mean, he would play acoustic guitar and sing to us at bedtime every night. Me and my 8 siblings, a whole pile of us, and his, he'd be playing banjo, mandolin, piano, all acoustic stuff. So I think those were the sounds that I heard first, and they've always been the most appealing. So it's no surprise to me that I play acoustic music too.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Wow.
But Irish music was a different thing. He didn't play it at all, but he had a few records that he liked to listen to, and I remember I was 10 years old, and I was hanging out in the living room one night before bed, and he would always be in there listening to one record or another, and I heard a record of the Boys of the Loch that he was listening to, and they were a band from Scotland and Ireland from the 70s and 80s, I think, and they featured a great whistle player, tin whistle player named Kyle McConnell, and he was on that record playing a duet with another whistle player. So I heard this double tin whistle extravaganza, and that was the thunderbolt that struck me at 10 years old. Wow. And I pointed my finger and wanted to do that.
Wow.
So
that was your first instrument?
That was the first instrument that I took seriously. My dad had taught all his kids piano for a few years. So I must have been doing piano from 6 or 7 years old, just for a few years, but never really settled right with me. But
until the tin whistle
tin whistle. That was the first thing I did on my own initiative.
You don't hear a lot of 10-year-olds, like, it's usually electric guitars.
Yeah, certainly. You would in Ireland for sure.
Okay.
I think it's almost required that you learn a few tunes on the tin whistle over there. But yeah, certainly not in America. And yeah, you're right. Electric guitar and rock and roll or pop or something, you know, would always be would be the natural thing.
Right.
But for me, no. This wildly unpopular music, but nevertheless amazing and beautiful
Yeah,
music.
it caught you.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Wow. And so I know that you play the Irish flute, which, is that the correct way to say it?
Yeah, Irish flute, wooden flute.
Okay.
Or an antique flute. The Irish flutes are actually either original models or replicas of 19th century classical flutes that would have been developed and played until they figured out the modern silver classical flutes, which
so this is a precursor to
this would have been what everybody played. Then they invented the silver one, and no one wanted the wooden ones anymore. But it turned out that the wooden ones were particularly well suited for playing fiddle tunes, and so they caught on in Ireland, and the flute tradition started up.
So what kind of music, what kind of Irish music did you start? Like, were they ballads, or what did you start with?
Well, I had a little instructional book and tape series that was actually put together by the whistle player that inspired me, Cal McConnell, and it was just an instructional series where you learn 50 tunes, starting from scratch, and so started with easy airs and marches and waltzes, and then moved on fairly quickly to jigs and reels, the fast dance
and
music that Irish music's known
what's the
for.
difference? Jigs and reels?
Jigs and 6/8, and a reels and 4/4. So there are different dances that are associated with each rhythm.
Now, are hornpipes associated with it?
Yeah, hornpipe would be the kind of third most popular type, and that's another version, kind of a slower swung, the 4/4.
Oh, okay.
That's slowed down so the dancers can fit more fancy footwork in. And it turns out the melody players take advantage of that too, and they can put in more triplets and fancy moves too. So they're a little slower, but that doesn't make them easier. Yeah,
that's good. So I know you also play the Elian pipes.
Yeah, the Uilleann pipes.
Uilleann, sorry.
Yep, pronounced Uilleann's the Irish word for elbow, and it's spelled Uilleann. And they're truly bizarre instruments, maybe rivaled only by the pedal steel in country music. Also a strange cat.
Yes.
But the Uilleann pipes, they're pretty dissimilar from the Scottish bagpipes, the war pipes, which are much louder and designed for to strike fear and terror in your opponents. And the Uilleann pipes are designed to be quite a bit more musical insofar as they can blend with the fiddles and the flutes more naturally.
Yeah, so they're from a flute family.
Yeah, the fingerings would be similar between the pipes, the flute, and the whistle. So oftentimes in Irish music you get musicians who would play all three pretty fluently, because there's a lot of crossover between them. And that's where I found myself after playing tin whistle for a few years. Was starting the flutes when I was 14, and shortly thereafter getting into the Uilleann pipes. And Uilleann pipes are notoriously hard to come by and hard to afford. So I made my own set off of instructions I found on the internet in the late 90s.
Wow.
And that got me going. It didn't work that great, but you don't need the best instrument when you're 15 and just trying to make sounds.
Yeah.
So I struggled along on that, and then eventually got my own set. And I still play them today for the odd gig, although I stick to flutes mainly, and then I play guitar and sing as well. And so I I tried not to spread myself too thin between all these things. You want to do everything when you're a teenager.
Yeah,
Just
right.
All these sounds, you want to play every instrument.
Wow.
And luckily, I had the maturity to decide just to do 2 or 3 things. Just don't try and do 12.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You play guitar also, and I don't know how often you play around, town here, Soulard area, but. I seen your guitar. You have a really cool little Gibson archtop. So, what is that thing?
Yeah, it's a Gibson archtop from the early '30s. It has a kind of really rich and biting sound. It cuts through everything, whether that be the mix of your band or the sea of drunks that you're playing for. But I kind of fell into it because I would often find myself on gigs with Irish players, and the Irish guitarists favor a standard dreadnought, often tuned down to drop D or dadgad. So they just get this big sound out of it, and I found that playing a dreadnought myself, kind of a bluegrass style, wouldn't cut through what they were doing. So it occurred to me I'd try something completely different, and so I had my eye out for something. And it's a funny story. I just went one Christmas, this is probably 10 years ago, down to buy strings at my local music shop in Irving, Texas, and hanging on the wall was this old Gibson archtop, and it looks really cool. It's all beat up, it's cracked, it's weathered. There's all sorts of it's just aged. Signs of use and wear and tear and stuff. And so it looked great, and I tried it out, and it sounded great. So I was like, oh, maybe this is what I need to cut through the din, and to have a different sound to balance off the dreadnoughts that I'm usually playing with. And it worked. Worked pretty well.
It's a beautiful sound, man. The way, I've noticed the chords that you and I guess a lot of Irish guys, the chords, the way you finger them, it look different to me, and the rhythms are a little bit different than what we're kind of used to around here, like maybe a country rhythm, bluegrass rhythm, and some swing rhythm, but it seems like a combination of a little of all of that.
The Irish guitar style has influenced my approach to playing American music. I actually don't play much Irish music on guitar. I leave that to the pros. But you often play kind of closed shape chords that leave out the thirds, and so you have drony chords, and then let the melody do all the work, or the vocal do all the work of filling in the gaps in the chords. And, you end up with some pretty cool shapes, different sounds. No cowboy chords, I love cowboy chords.
Yeah, right. But it's it really changes that sound is unbelievable.
So I've had a lot of fun just kind of figuring it out. Kind of how to fit in, make something work.
I think I heard a song. You did a Townes Van Zandt song, Snowing in Ronin.
Snowing on Raton.
On Raton, which is a really cool tune. I think Emmylou Harris might have done that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have picked that up. It's one of Townes' best loved songs.
Yeah, you do a great version.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw you and Alan Murray and your friend Caitlin.
Oh, right. Caitlin Warbelow.
Thank you.
Yeah. All old friends of mine and musical colleagues. I always, bringing up that song is a good example for me of what I play Irish music on the flutes and whistles. And when it comes to guitar and singing, that's my outlet for playing American music and the Texas music that I grew up hearing.
Nice.
Kind of alongside Irish music as a teenager. So I've always just kind of had these two parallel threads, and I would choose to sing a Townes Van Zandt song because that's where I'm from. That's what I grew up with.
Not bad, though.
Singing the Irish songs always seems a little alien to me. It's kind of hard to get my head around.
Yeah, true Texan, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So what were some of the first bands? Were you in Irish bands first, or some of these?
Let's see what happens. I would have started playing out in public, going to they call them sessions in Irish music, not jams. And there's sessions all over the country and the world. Just little conclaves of Irish music enthusiasts, often once a week in a bar, and you drink pints and play tunes. That's how it happens in Ireland too.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a really funny session that I discovered and started going to when I was probably 15 or 16, and it was in a trailer in downtown Dallas. It's called the Celtic Quill, and my dad would take me there every, I think Wednesday night it was, and there was a strange crew of people in there, along with some really cool Irish music enthusiasts who helped me on my way as I was trying to figure out what this music was about and how to play it. And, so that was a great influence, and it's very social music. You know, you learn these tunes at home, but the whole point is to go out and play the tunes with other musicians, and it's a real distinct tradition in that the musicians all play the melody in unison together. So you know, you're kind of playing the same thing. It's not like everybody has different parts that are arranged. You get everybody playing these tunes together, and they've learned them, and there's this collective experience that emerges.
Does one levitate to the best one, making, sounding the melody, playing the melody? Is it like, I like the way, maybe that fiddle player's playing the melody, so you kind of copy what he's doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's Irish music's heavily stylized. There's a lot of different ways to play it, and so you kind of grow up hearing these styles and see what you gravitate towards, and both what instrument you gravitate towards, but also, like, as a flute player, I might be more influenced by fiddle players than anything else, so you try and do on the flute what you hear being done on the fiddle, and that has always helped the evolution of styles on each instrument. And determines a lot of the choices I make.
And you're learning. I mean, you're kind of learning, like, hey, I never played it. That's way. I like that way he's doing it, or she or he's doing it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
it's it's you're all playing the same melody, but it's going to sound a little different on every instrument because they can't all do exactly the same thing. So you have the melody that you can hear. But all the instruments are kind of adding their own little flavors to it, and they're, just different twists and turns. Yeah. And individual players can add melodic variations and integrate that into the tune. That's normal, and so you have. It's not regimented. It's not strict at all. The melody is always present. The melody always comes first. But you have all this other stuff that's going on that gives it this rich quality in spite of everybody playing in unison. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's real distinct. I don't really know of another tradition that does it quite like that, because bluegrass, you take turns playing the melody.
I think of Cajun music, but it's somewhat like that. But but they have their own
old-timey.
Yeah, old-timey. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
But Irish music has a much wider variety of melody instruments. So you have like it seems like an infinite variety of sounds depending on how you bind things and different styles that are played, different tunes. So
when you hear it, it's Irish.
It has its own infectious quality.
Yes. Yeah. That's cool. Now. I know you lived in New York for a while, right? When did you live in New York?
So I moved there when I was 19 years old. I left Texas.
And you were playing, were you going there for music?
Although I didn't want to go to study music academically. I thought that would ruin it. And I may or may not have been right. I don't know. Sometimes I think I could have gotten a little better education on a few things, but I was determined to do it my own way. I guess I don't know if it's the influence of my parents or growing up in Texas that gave me an independent spirit, but I had it, and I was going to do it on my own.
All right.
So, but I knew that it, at least was smart enough to know that you needed to surround yourself with the best musicians you could in order to improve. So going to New York was the primary. That was the motivator behind it.
So there's a lot of Irish musicians there, or just good Irish players?
A lot of Irish musicians, and there always has been. New York is, along with maybe Chicago and Boston, has always been the mecca for Irish music here in the States. And, it's just from the Irish immigrant communities that were
Oh, okay,
so abundant there in those cities, and so for forever and still now.
So
you
it's
just get a
tradition
wealth of
in New
Irish
York.
musicians.
Then I guess there's a traditional music scene.
Yeah.
From the immigrants.
Yeah, and it always has been.
Okay.
But now it's augmented by Americans learning Irish music like myself. And in New York, you have musicians from Ireland playing. You have Irish American musicians, who've been born over there, but their parents or grandparents would have been Irish, so they'd have grown up with that stuff.
Wow.
And then you had weirdos like me, Americans who just heard it and were obsessed with figuring it out and had no
That's good. That's
relevant
good for us.
connection, genealogically maybe, but we just wanted to play the music. And so I think, when I moved to New York, that would have been 2002, I think. It was a really buzzing time for the Irish music scene because my generation of musicians were all moving there to learn. So I was not the only one doing this sort of thing. So there was this sort of influx of talent and interest from the outside, and then the Irish and Irish American musicians who were already there, and it was a really, I think, a special time in New York City, and I've heard that it's not what it was then, so I lucked out to be a part of that.
And how long were you there?
I was there for, I went to college in New Jersey for 4 years when I first moved up, and then stayed for another 6 years or so.
Wow.
So I was there a decade.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
You must have learned a lot. It sounds like a, time you were learning tons of stuff.
Oh man, I was soaking it all up, and there were so many great players and so many great styles represented. I was kind of always drawn to like the real fast and creative playing that you'd find up in the Bronx. But then out in Brooklyn and other parts of Manhattan, there'd be other sessions where they'd play a lot more of a mellow, laid-back style, which I wasn't as familiar with, but I got to hang around those musicians and learn why that was a great way to play it too. So it just broadened my mind.
That's on the job training, right? I mean,
I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
That's amazing.
I think back then, playing music is always like this. You look back, and you realize how much you didn't know and how much you thought you knew, and now you know you didn't know anything. It makes you kind of curious about where you're at any given point in time after you've lived long enough, right?
Well, that's the way. That's the natural way.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
And the only thing to do is jump in and figure it out. And the musicians. Irish musicians tend to be real generous, and because of the social session atmosphere, the way it's played, if you have put in your time and you're clearly trying to learn, and whether you're beginner, intermediate, advanced, if you're really trying, they'll let you in. They'll because they know that's how you learn is by being included.
That's cool.
So that's what I found
really
in New York.
Cool. Yeah.
People were always helping me out because they knew I was trying. I wanted to do it.
Right. They knew you weren't just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
It was part of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's cool. So after New York, were you traveling? Were you playing music for a living? Or was that?
Well, after I finished college, I thought that I would try playing gigs for a year in New York and see how it went. And it went well.
Oh, good.
I made enough to pay rent most of the time.
It's not easy to do.
No, not easy. And also had a great time doing it. At that point, I no longer had any homework from college, so I was free. Free to enjoy that free beer that you'd get on the gigs. And New York was a great place to embark on on this sort of gigging career. There are a lot of gigs, and the bars are open till 4 a.m. and there's always something going on. So I spent I guess like 6 years or so just playing the session scene around and doing pickup gigs and work. And it's a lot of session stuff like that. So a lot of it's informal. It's not based around a band, which was an interesting feature of playing for a living. That kind of came to an end. So I got a job playing a very unexpected job playing for a famous Irish folk singer from the 70s named Derek Warfield, who had a band called the Wolf Tones back in the 70s that was incredibly popular and highly regarded as a folk singer and an historian of Irish music. And he has a following all around the world, but particularly in Ireland and here in the U.S. And his original band broke up, and he started hiring young musicians to play along with him. So I got a job. Alan Murray was in that outfit as well, and we toured with him for 2.5 years all over the country and beyond. So that was That was a great opportunity for me. And I was kind of needing to get out of New York at the time anyway. I was needed to do something new. So that was
that's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
And I know you went to Rome for tour or for teaching. Or...
My dad actually was teaching for a semester over there. So me and my friend Alan Murray.
Oh, the great Alan Murray.
Great Alan Murray.
Yeah.
Yep. Also a regular musician here in Soulard.
Yeah.
We went over there to hang out with my dad and and we picked up a few gigs in the process and played a couple little concerts and some bar gigs in Rome. That was pretty wild.
Yeah, even the Italians like Irish music. Is
that? No, it was
universal.
Anywhere, and there were Irish pubs in Rome. That's where we went.
Okay.
We just went in, knocking, saying, "Hey, we're here. If you guys want some music, give us a call."
Yeah, and I know you and Alan go to Alaska sometimes.
Yeah, we both worked a bunch there. Another colleague of ours from New York City, her name's Caitlin Warblow, and she's from Alaska originally. She's always been keen on bringing her musical friends up to Alaska to do gigs and to experience the otherness of Alaska, which is a pretty amazing place. So Alan and I have both been up to teach at a summer music festival up there in Fairbanks, and then a few other things over the years. And more recently, I've gone up playing at the Juneau Folk Fest, which happens every April.
Oh, nice. Are you going this year? Are you going?
Yeah, I think it's just about all booked, but I'll be going up in a few weeks here.
Oh, great.
April.
All right. Yeah. And I know that St. Patty's Day's coming up, and you're playing at McGurk's here in Soulard. You got a lot of music.
That's the mainstay for Irish music here. Incredible bar. It always features incredible music, and so I'm playing with my old New York band this week, the Bronx Boys.
Oh, great!
That's Alan Murray and Isaac Alderson.
Isaac, another great one, Isaac.
And then the weekend has us jumping all over the place with the parade and with St. Patrick's Day itself. And I'm actually flying to Nashville to play a couple gigs with Kerry Novotny and Johnny Connolly, two other musicians who are also regulars at McGurk's.
Oh, great.
They come from out of town. Johnny's from Ireland and Kerry's from Portland, Oregon. And so we're meeting in the middle in Nashville to play a couple shows.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you have any recordings? You selling anything off stage or website or anything like that?
I'm pretty disorganized with that stuff. There's I haven't gotten up to speed on the online presence yet, but there's a couple recording things I've done over the years, and a couple things I'm working on now. The fiddle player from Alaska that I mentioned, Caitlin Warblow, I was part of a project of hers called Warblow Range. And that was all traditional tunes, and that was a really cool thing that just emerged from a few of us playing together over the years.
Okay.
And then I guess one chapter of this story that I haven't referred to yet was a 3-year spell down in Disney World. And that's where I was between the tour with Derek for a few years and moving to St. Louis. And I've been here in St. Louis 6 years now, and before I got to St. Louis, I was in Disney World for 3 years, and played with a bunch of great musicians down there, including a great fiddle player named Colin Farrell from...
the actor.
Yeah, the actor, the one and only. Yeah, the actor doesn't know that he's been overridden by a great fiddle player from Manchester.
All right, yes.
And Colin lives in Florida, and I gigged down there with him for a few years, and me and Colin and Alan put an album together as well. That's out there in the cosmos.
Okay,
you know?
yeah. You can probably search it somewhere, maybe.
Yeah,
What's the name of the album? Just
what did we call it? Look up Colin Farrell. And you'll find it. I forget what it was actually called, but it had the album cover is something to be proud of. We were living in a house that had a swimming pool, like most houses down in Florida, I guess, and probably the only time I'll ever have that. So the album cover is all three of us like in or jumping into the pool with instruments, and it's pretty wild.
All right, well, we'll definitely look for that.
Yeah.
Speaking of recording, I know you brought your tin whistle. I was going to call it a recorder, but it's tin whistle.
Definitely not a recorder.
Yeah, but there's a waltz that you play that I think you like it, but I really like it too. It's called Margaret's Waltz.
Oh yeah,
Now,
one of my favorites.
Could you play a little?
Sure.
You don't have to play too much of it, but just to.
So that's the sound of a tin whistle. It's the simplest instrument. It's just a metal tube with 6 holes in it, and then you blow into the top of it, and off you go.
Well, you gotta know where you put your fingers, right?
Yeah, right. So this is what I started playing when I was 10 years old, and still doing it.
All right.
So yeah, I'll play this tune, Margaret's Waltz.
All right.
If I can remember it.
Yeah.
There it is.
Margaret's Waltz. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. All right. Well, I was going to ask you too. Is there a best gig that comes to your mind? You know, you've done a lot of gigs. I know. I'm asking, probably, maybe it's too detailed, but like a best gig that comes to your mind.
Best gig that comes to mind. I'm sure there has. Yeah. I would have to say the best gigs I've ever played have been up at John D. McGurk's.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Okay.
With my longtime trio, the Bronx Boys that I mentioned earlier, Isaac and Alan and myself.
Excellent.
And we played a residency gig up there for probably 6 or 7 years. And we were there 2 months a year. Every May and September we'd come in, and those gigs were so much fun. They still are. Yeah. But that particular time we were at the height of our powers in our late 20s, and we had a great following up there, and it's a great bar for music. It's a great stage to play, and when that place gets buzzing on a Friday, Saturday night, man, we had some of the most fun gigs we've ever had.
Great.
So I put that at the top.
All right. Well, okay. Well, what are your worst gigs? What are some of your worst gigs?
Oh man. Well, Disney World got to be pretty tough at times. Yeah, that was a funny gig. It treated us really well, and it was a really, really stable situation. But the conditions were often challenging. We were playing in Epcot like we were buskers, and it was a 4-piece traditional band, unamplified. So we'd play on the curb there by the Rose and Crown pub, and we'd play 7 shifts a day. We'd play 15 minutes and then 45 minutes off, and so back and forth.
Work.
And and those in the heat of summer when it was like 110 degrees and humid out, and your instruments won't stay in tune, and your shins start sweating. That's
hot.
That's real different. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out, a lot of din, and you can't hear anything that's going on, including yourself. And those are pretty bad gigs.
Yeah. Wow.
But stuck with it, kept
Right,
trying the prize,
right,
you know.
right.
There were also good gigs down there when the weather was nice.
Yeah, yeah.
but I have some unpleasant memories of some of those sweaty times down there.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if you could go back in time, would you take the same musical path?
Oh, that's a great question. If I didn't, it would still look pretty close to what I did do. I kind of, in some ways, I wish I was a fiddle player. I might, if I had to choose it and start over, I might play fiddle instead. But I think there's less flute players in the world, so it might be a lucky
More gigs.
Twist of fate that I'm the flute player. Wow. And yeah, I think I'm pretty pleased with the way things have turned out. But it's funny. It's never what you thought it would be. It's different. It's not in terms of better or worse. It's like, I didn't expect I'd be doing this gig, or I didn't expect I'd be singing this song, or that sort of thing. So kind of have to have a versatility, a flexibility, and an open-mindedness, because what I envisioned myself doing when I was, say, 16 years old and decided I wanted to play this professionally isn't quite what has happened. But I like what has happened. It's turned me on to all sorts of different things, and I play music differently than I would have if things had gone the way I expected them to. I think that it's hard to make plans with this sort of stuff. You just hear sounds, you get inspired by things, and you just kind of follow that muse.
Nice.
That's the thing to do. You trust yourself there.
Excellent, man. Yeah. Well, Dan Lowery, thank you. The incomparable Dan Lowery. So he's a top Irish / top musician here in St. Louis area. So please come and see him. He's usually at McGurk's maybe every month, a few days.
Yeah, McGurk's pretty regularly, playing with Kevin Buckley often down there.
Oh, yes, and, Kevin. Excellent.
Play with my brother. We play Texas music at Texas country and folk music at the Hi-Hats here in Soulard every Wednesday nights as well. So
great.
Those are the two mainstays these days.
That's good to know. Great. All right. Well, thank you for spending time here on Ear-Wicker Podcast.
Thanks, Vince.
All right, and we will see you at the next gig.
Remember to like and subscribe to this podcast, and we'll see you backstage.